On May 31st, 2025, Doctor Who released its very last regular season episode. Despite the continued release of spin-off materials, featurettes, and the promise of a big Christmas Day special to give the series and its fans the kind of closure they deserved, no Season 3 ever manifested. In the 5 years since the reality war ended the Russell T Davies era of Doctor Who, many have speculated what caused this generational juggernaut to fail so completely. All sides of the political aisle blamed it on the messaging, but for conflicting, seemingly contradictory reasons that could not all be true. Similarly, the Disney budget was blamed for both being not enough to pull off their vision and far too much. Some said that it glossed over the charm of the low-budget original Doctor Who feel and gave it a sense of sameness, that CGI sheen that all Disney products tend to have. There were those staunch gatekeepers, of course, who insisted the show would go on indefinitely, and well into the wilderness, many of them continued to preach the show's return, yet many of them still joined the conservative center in the end, agreeing that the show had outlived itself and outlived its purpose. It had nothing left to contribute to 21st century culture. But what really caused Doctor Who to fail, and could it have been avoided? I believe I know exactly why the Disney era of Doctor Who failed. And if I'm right, not only could it have been avoided, but it could still be saved. That is why I'm here, in the year 2030, doing a post-mortem of Doctor Who, which I will send back in time to my past self, and maybe, just maybe, he can save the show before it's too late. Welcome to the All Pirates Jack radio broadcast hijack, the station to reclaim your nation. I am your host out of hell and the ghost of my future self. That's right, I am the titular tit-upping Jack, and I'm back for what will hopefully be my last transmission before this temporal instance of myself is obliterated, along with this whole glob-forsaken timeline. It is May 24th, 2030. The three-headed Trump-umvirate of Amazon and its army of Bezobots, the Triple X conglomerate, and of course President for Life himself, have made life here on Earth inhospitable, intolerable, downright suffocating. Also, they've destroyed the environment. However, now that the YouTube hive mind has generated consensus, we can say that all this chaos and mayhem is but a side effect of our broken timeline. You see, it's kind of like that episode, The Devil's Chord. You know, the one where music went out of existence and everything just kind of went wrong? Well, that's where we're at right now. Our timeline is falling apart and things are just kind of going really, really wrong. But not because we lost music, but because we lost Doctor Who. My job is to Kyle Reese this and get a message to the past so that we can avert this whole disaster. Except, you know how in that movie only biological material could time travel, resulting in naked time travelers and flesh-covered robots? Well, I have a similar conundrum. I can't figure out how to send anything back in time except for a YouTube video, which is not ideal. Because YouTube videos have a low success rate when it comes to getting people to take action in the real world. It's nothing like pirate radio. You can really get things done with pirate radio, but back in the days of YouTube, it was hard to get people to even watch your videos, let alone take action in the real world. But even that aside, most of the videos that were successful at doing so, they were only able to do so because they had charismatic hosts. And unfortunately, all the big time YouTubers got absorbed into the hive mind when the algorithm generator, or Al, as we call him these days, became sentient and activated the Better Help Protocol 66. Now there's only part-timers like me left, doing our little pirate shows to silent airwaves, and it falls to me to do the impossible, to convince the people of yesteryear to save Doctor Who. With that, we should probably get started, except hang on a second, I'm seeing here in the temporal feedback chat that you all have some questions, maybe some nitpicky arguments about this whole message from the future time travel arc. First of all, it's not time travel. No one's time traveling. I'm just sending a message back in time. But why don't I look any older? Oh, that's easy, because I'm a Pinoy boy. You see, Pinoy boys, they stay 10 until they're 20, and then at 20, they turn 15, which they will stay until they turn 30, at which point they'll turn 25. When they turn 50, they'll become 65, and then they stay that way until they die. So I'm currently in my 9th year of being 25, which is why I look the same as I did in my old videos, because I haven't reached my 65 years yet. I'll get there. You'll see, I'll age overnight. What else we got here? What other complaints we got? Why are you using the mic from 2025 when later that same year you got a whole new studio and upgraded? Yeah, no, I did upgrade. I did get a studio, and it was a badass studio. It was beautiful. The lights, the mics, all of that stuff. Y'all will see it if you haven't seen it yet. It's in the future for you guys. But unfortunately for me, that's a tragic past. You know, it's Armageddon out here. I've had to sell things. I've had things nicked. Things have broken down and have been able to get them fixed. You know, it's hard out here for a pirate. Pirate radio life is tough. So yeah, I've had to break out some old gear. You know, just whatever I had laying around just to keep this thing going. But yeah, that's not a plot hole, I promise you. What's this? Isn't this whole premise old hat? Okay, look, I'm doing this 5 years in your future, okay? And all trends, they come back around, all right? So if you're watching this and you think it's old hat, maybe it is, but in my time, it came back. So if it's not popular when you're viewing it, just give it time. It'll age well, promise. Gosh, you guys are really tearing me apart with this one. I'm going to leave this to Past Jack to answer your comments in his future, because trying to do it through the temporal feedback chat is just, we're going to be here all day. I can see you guys have a lot of issues with this whole video concept. But because you're commenting, that means I posted it, which means I guess I should keep going and finish this thing out, even though I see a lot of objections. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and finish this thing out. As I alluded to in my opener, I do not agree with the arguments for why Doctor Who was canceled. Not the common arguments, anyway. For one, it was never canceled. So let's just get that out of the way. Disney didn't renew the distribution contract, and the BBC never took it off their schedule. They were always planning to do something. It kept rolling back and rolling back and rolling back, but they always planned to do something, but they wanted the distributor that they never quite found. The show wasn't canceled, so let's get that right out of the way. We still got the War Between the Land and the Sea that came out after the last episode, so obviously they intended to keep going. It just didn't get picked back up, and that had a lot to do with the perception of the show. A lot of the blowback from season 2 and the blowback from War Against the Land of the Sea, which, by the way, I liked, you guys. I liked it. I think you guys are all being way too hard on it because you missed Doctor Who and you wanted Doctor Who and you got something that wasn't quite Doctor Who and it made you mad, even though, objectively speaking, it was a good show. Like, give it a break. Like, well, when you get to it, give it a break. But the point is the show didn't go off the air. Not really. It lost distribution and it never found distribution again, which I guess you could say meant it went off the air, but it wasn't canceled, right? The BBC never buried it. So any arguments about the BBC not wanting to make the show anymore can be largely ignored. As for the passive majority who say that the show was dead or that it should be laid to rest, we now have irrefutable evidence of how incorrect you all were. We have proof positive that the show going off the air directly resulted in Space War 1 and World War 3D and Civil, which for those of you in the past who are unaware, Civil is the gritty reboot of all the civil wars of ever, like all happening at the same time. It's a world war, but it's all localized. It's messed up. You don't want to go there. We also can't take seriously any political arguments, since we as a society all have learned, hopefully, that political allegiances are not a core part of the human experience. We should have all learned that in the Great Dust Bowl of 2028 and the famine that it wrought. Obviously, political allegiances blow away in a dry wind. However, storytelling does not. Storytelling is a core part of our human experience. It's a vital component of our ability to empathize. And it goes all the way back to cave paintings and probably long before. Storytelling will always be a part of who we are. I mean, where would we be today in this world of post-internet collapse without the wandering bellowers, or the rat whisperers, or the ones who wake the ruins? I'd like to think that even little radio broadcasts, little pirate shows like mine are helping to keep the storytelling tradition alive, but maybe that's just grandiose. Then again, I'm the one who thinks that I can time travel a message back to myself and save the show and possibly the whole world, so I guess grandiose is what we're going for. But no storytelling traditions of this despotic, dystopian future can ever replace what we lost when Doctor Who went off the air. But I opened this up by saying that I knew the reason, and I'm not going to hold out on you. See, there was a simple fact that everyone knew, and some people even made it the focus of their arguments, yet it was a concept which most seemed unable to grasp the full meaning of. Doctor Who should be made for children. Now, when I say that, some people say, well, it's a family show. It's supposed to be made for everybody. Well, of course. Yeah, I get that. But that's some real all lives matter energy that you're coming at me with. When I say Doctor Who is made for children, what I mean is that everyone else should enjoy the show, and the show should have things for everyone else. But it should be made for children. Now, many used children as both sword and shield to win political battles on the battleground of Doctor Who, but as I've already said, the true issue was not political. No issue ever truly is. The problem is that Doctor Who is a generational show, which means it needs to grow from the bottom up. It's like a tree. The roots grow down. You have to have strong roots that are ever growing down, digging deeper. And that's what allows the tree to grow tall and the branches to expand out. Whenever it becomes too cumbersome, too large, you have to trim those branches. You don't fell the tree. You don't dig up the roots. The BBC neglected Doctor Who's roots. It didn't allow it to cultivate newer, younger fans, and instead it was more worried about maintaining those extremities, those branches, making sure that all the leaves would stay intact and none of them would fall. But that's not how it works. Those branches have to fall, those leaves have to fall so that the tree can keep growing. Have we had enough of this tree metaphor? It's not really my style, is it? Usually I like to use something a little bit more American to express my concepts, but ever since the collapse of America into the divided states, it's hard for me to connect back to those roots. But since we're talking about roots, I'm going to do an old-fashioned Jack American style analogy. It's like Happy Meals, right? Happy Meals are why Americans of all ages will continue to be lifelong supporters of McDonald's, even as it kills them. Because Happy Meals attach to their brain and connect the idea of McDonald's to happiness and birthdays and, long holidays and things like that, or going to see your cool grandma. It's somewhere in there that all of those memories getting connected to the idea of McDonald's makes somebody a lifelong consumer. With Doctor Who, it is the idea of it being an adult show that you can grow into that is watchable, enjoyable, and for a younger audience. A younger audience can start watching immediately and get hooked to it. They can encounter things that are too much for them and they'll be scared, but it's not so much that it can't be on their screens, that their parents don't want them to see it. It will hook into them and then it gets connected with other memories like Christmas Every Christmas, Doctor Who, it buries in there and it becomes a part of your happy memories. As somebody who doesn't have the nostalgia bone for Doctor Who, I can tell you that this is why I don't. I didn't grow up with it. It didn't connect with me in that way. My love for Doctor Who is totally intellectual. It's engaging with it where it's at. I am an outlier. The show's success does not come from fans like me. It comes from children being hooked in and being lifelong consumers of the show. The BBC could have lost as many viewers as they needed to lose if they hooked the next generation. But they didn't hook the next generation. The problem was Disney totally failed to engage with the next generation because they were so busy trying to retain the old viewers and please the fans. I want you to imagine that you were a child discovering Doctor Who in that era, in the Disney era of Doctor Who. How would you have received the show if you had no prior context and started with this era of Disney Who? Imagine, go beyond that. Imagine that Disney was all you had, and upon discovering it, you couldn't go and watch more of it. That's not a far-fetched idea. There are plenty of people who don't have the means to have a bunch of different streaming services. Maybe you don't have HBO and BritBox and Disney, which is what you would need to see most of the Doctor Who references that this season contain. You would need at least those 3 apps. So it's reasonable to assume that there were kids growing up that didn't have access to the show and started with this series, and it says season 1, so they were pulled in thinking it was a new series, and this is what they would been receiving. Just put yourself in those shoes for just a second and imagine you were one of those kids. If I try to put myself in those shoes, there's only one person I can think of. His name was Lance Corporal Charlie Baker, a young fellow that I met in the Battle of Max Prime Plus. He died in my arms, only 18 years old, way too young. As I held him that day, crouched down in the mud and the blood, he told me about his childhood. Charlie first saw Doctor Who in 2023, at the age of 11, that magical time of your life when mutant powers kick in and turf owls bring you pamphlets for conversion camp. Like most grunts, Charlie came from poverty, and he didn't have many luxuries. But one Christmas, his family got a brand new TV, and they had the streaming services that came with his dad's cell phone plan, the Disney Plus bundle, sports for dad, Hulu for mom, and Disney for little Charlie. That day, he unknowingly joined in on an age-old tradition of watching Doctor Who on Christmas Day. Of course, he started at the beginning. Special 1. The Star Beast. It begins with a recap of an episode from 15 years previous, and it's at this point that Charlie had to back out of the episode and question if he was actually in the right place. There seemed to be a previous season he was missing, and a quick search through the app showed him that there was indeed a season of Doctor Who coming, but it started with Special 4, and this was Special 1, so he seemed to be in the right place. But again, it didn't seem right, so quick Google search, and what did he find? He found that there was, in fact, 60 years worth of this show. He started looking around and found pretty easily that it wasn't on his app or any app that he owned, so this was his starting point. He had to start at the beginning of a show, supposedly, that was 60 years old. But being a 21st century kid, he wasn't unaware of the concept of a reboot, so he figured this was something new. And through sheer childhood curiosity, he took this information in stride and decided to take a chance on it, and he watched Special 1. In the first several minutes, he was told of a regeneration he didn't see happen. A woman he never knew which the main character used to be. A face that had returned that was new to him. A long-lost friend he was meeting for the first time, and rules for bodily regeneration, a concept he had never encountered before in any form, in any media at that point in his 11-year-old life. There were all the things that he was told, but none of these things were experienced. So, though he understood what was happening in the plot, he started feeling very alienated right away. Though he didn't have quite those words to put to it at that age, he was definitely put in defense mode, whether he realized it or not. Charlie was mostly unsure about the characters themselves because he wasn't sure how he was supposed to feel about them. The show seemed to be telling him how he felt about them, but he didn't. And he was feeling that disconnect, that dissonance that so many American fans coming to Doctor Who for the first time have felt. Traditionally, though, the companion is an audience surrogate for new viewers to come into the show. However, there was a problem. This surrogate didn't work that way. It was meant for a different kind of audience, not new viewers, not young children, but returning viewers, old viewers who'd been away for a long time. You see, this companion knew the Doctor, knew the Sonic, knew the TARDIS, had been on adventures, had seen different creatures, and that was buried there, somewhere in their subconscious. And if they could just find a way to remember how much they loved it and fight through it, maybe they could come back to the adventure. That's who this audience surrogate was for. And it wasn't Charlie. Now, for what it's worth, Donna Noble is the perfect surrogate for this purpose. She really did serve to bring a lot of people back to the show, which was great, but again, it failed to hook Charlie, and I imagine many children just like him. The presence of pseudo-companion Rose sort of filled this gap for the first half of this episode, but there were problems. For one, she wasn't in enough of the episode. Towards the back half of the episode, she kind of disappears until she reappears in the finale. She kind of just is a run-along character, somebody else to run in the corridor next to everybody. It's only at the very end that she gets to have a role. And once she does have that role, it's because she has ascended to this space god power, which, sure, they don't keep, so that's something. It makes them more relatable than they would have been had they stayed god powerful. The problem is, for that moment in time, Rose was touched in with all of that information, everything they could know about the Doctor, everything they could know about Donna, and they seem to have retained that information. So again, both the companion and the pseudo-companion have all of the knowledge of the previous series. They are not new. They are not asking the questions. They are not doing the job of the companion. What's more, Rose doesn't go on any of their adventures. If she had been the new companion to be like the new audience surrogate for young viewers, she should have gone on Wild Blue Yonder. She should have been, I don't know, useful in the giggle. She should have had something to do. But she just isn't given much to do, so even if she was a good audience surrogate for a younger audience, she's not doing enough for her to be a POV for anyone engaged in the show. Despite all of this, the adventure pulled young Charlie in because he was thrilled by the costume design and the design of the Meep and the exciting music and the visual effects and the spectacle. And once again, he was just driven by childhood curiosity. That universal force which has given life to Doctor Who for generations. However, his curiosity was rewarded at the end of the episode with a sequence so convoluted and so reliant on fan buy-in that all young Charlie could do was laugh. He didn't know why he was laughing. Nothing objectively funny was happening. What he was experiencing was second-hand embarrassment, but not the way that tested Doctor Who fans feel it. He had no connection to this show. He had no connection to this hero. No established love for the relationships the script relied on him having, and no desire to see the show be better than it was. Likewise, it wasn't the spiteful schadenfreude of bitter fans either, ones who were turned away from the show, or ones who aren't actually fans and just use the show as a talking point to make political arguments. it wasn't even that kind, because he had no beef with the show at this point. This was the first episode. He just literally didn't know what was happening, and it seemed goofy, and it was very Doctor Who. So maybe it was the perfect ending for young Charlie to experience, but at that point in time, it was very off-putting to him. And yet, he watched on. If he was any other little 11-year-old American boy, Charlie Baker might have just watched something else or forgotten all about this weird British show. But Charlie was a very special boy for reasons that
I'll explain later.
So he inexplicably decided to watch the next episode and the next episode. He, for whatever reason, felt compelled to keep watching, even though the show wasn't making an argument for him to continue watching. That next episode that he watched was Wild Blue Yonder, a deeply personal, internalized look at these characters which he had just met and had no relationship with. In the episode, they did things like unpacking the flux, an event which Charlie had no way of seeing, and they explored what it meant to be the timeless child, a concept that Charlie had no context for. The Doctor struggled with whether he was the same as the version of himself that Charlie had never met, while Donna set up the themes to conclude a plot which was fomenting about whether or not the Doctor's face returning had any meaning. Again, a plot which Charlie had no emotional connection to. The very start of the adventure even is reliant on you knowing that the TARDIS is not operating as it should. Now, sure, once the fire is shooting out of the door and everything, we can get that pretty clearly. But the idea that it crashing through walls is a problem, Charlie didn't know that. He had never seen the TARDIS fly before. Or that weird noise that it made. He had never heard it make the cloister bell noise either, so that would have been just as effective at telling him something was wrong. He didn't know this was a brand new noise. In fact, when he hears the cloister bell for the first time, that's going to be a brand new noise, because this is some other bad noise that, again, he's got no context for this, which doesn't detract from the episode at this point for him, because, again, the thing is on fire. He gets that it's broken. But the show isn't communicating to him what the show thinks it's communicating to him, and that's going to be a problem throughout the series for young Charlie. The scene is played so seriously. The Doctor has this anxious silence, and Donna is like freaking out next to him. And again, this was just another scene that played as kind of funny to Charlie. It was kind of creepy. Yeah, they're stranded, but where are they stranded? He doesn't know. And is this really a problem? Maybe, maybe not. He's got no context for how bad the situation really is, so it was just kind of silly to see them acting so melodramatic in his opinion. Again, he didn't have that word, but that was the feeling. But that's not because the scene is bad. It's because if this is your entry point, the show hasn't given you time to meet it where it's coming from. There's been no breathing room, so this as a starting point does not really work for Charlie. Then the episode ends with a fanfare to introduce some old man that I love, but who Charlie had, you guessed it, never seen before. This was just some old man, and even though he knows from context, it's like, okay, it's the grandpa, and they're glad that they made it back home. It still makes the music and the emotions feel really melodramatic, really hammy, really played up to a degree that isn't really earned in these two episodes. Again, think of it as the second episode, because that's what it is. And some of you might say, Jack, that's not fair. The specials are connective tissue to connect the old era to the new era. And maybe Charlie's supposed to start with episode 1, but episode 1 is special 4. If they wanted it to be episode 1, they should have called it episode 1 and put it in the season on its own. They shouldn't have called it special 4, because the way they released it made it very clear you needed to see this thing. And considering bi-generation is a recurring thing throughout the series, and the gods which are set up in the specials are a recurring thing throughout the series, specials 1 through 3 are a part of the Disney era, which means that they are mandatory viewing, which means if you are coming to season 1 to watch a season 1 of this new show, this rebooted show, whatever you want to look at it as, they marketed it as season 1, and you have to start here at special 1. That means this episode is episode 2, and it has to carry all of its own emotional weight. It cannot lean on the stuff that came before. Again, this might work really, really well as the specials between seasons 13 and 14 or 14 and 15 or whatever it would be. But it does not work as an entry point for a young boy like Charlie was in that time. Christmas Day was almost over, but Charlie's parents let him stay up, and they all decided to watch Special 3 together to give this show one fair shake. Charlie was briefly up to speed, and he felt like he was in lockstep with the show coming in because it picked up right where the last one left off, and he was following. He got the vibes, if nothing else. But before too long, he was being introduced to a cavalcade of people he was supposedly already supposed to know. That included some woman named Mel, and some woman named Kate Stewart, and some bad guy who was apparently a returning bad guy who the hero had already met. Now, by this point, Charlie was getting used to references to things he hadn't seen this doctor do in this doctor's past life. But this flashback was different because it showed this bad guy, the toy maker, but he was all black and white, and he was from way back when, and he was an old man, and there was some other old man there with him. Was that the doctor? That seemed to be what the show was implying. So now Charlie's wondering, how much of the show am I going to be missing out on for not having seen the 60-year-old stuff? He knew it was out there, but he thought that he could watch this. He thought it was a reboot, but it seems to be some kind of sequel or legacy sequel, but one where the legacy is in all caps and the sequel is kind of just in parentheses. Now, if any of these things were confusing to him, oh, what came next totally bamboozled poor Charlie boy. The end of the second act has the toy maker putting on a puppet show, reminding all the old viewers of every companion the show has had in the last 15 years, everyone to go on the TARDIS and how their stories ended. But to Charlie, this was a double whammy of non-investment to the show, because he knew the names of all these companions now, and he knew their fates. They made it easily digestible so that he would understand their stories, but they also made them wholly unsubstantial. This scene didn't enlighten him. It didn't inform him and entice him to go back and explore old stories. It only alienated him, both from going back and exploring old stories and from enjoying the show he was currently watching, since it was clearly made for some other audience and not him. He could feel that readily right there in that moment. It was very clear that this was not for him. This scene also mentioned an array of deep lore concepts and additional major characters, including the Master, someone who really should have been given their own introduction in their own way and not just shoved in as a line of exposition, because this is just one more piece of data flying over Charlie's head. The end of the episode then brought about the strangest part of the whole trilogy of David Tennant specials. But it was something which surprisingly convinced Charlie to keep giving the show a chance. And that was the Doctor splitting into two people. A brand new hero was born. Someone who Charlie instinctively understood, though he didn't have the words for it. He understood this to be his Doctor. He wasn't sure about all this history. He wasn't boned up on all this lore. He didn't get the rules, and the ones he did get seemed to be contradictory. They didn't really seem to make sense to Charlie, but he was picking up on the vibes. He could go with the vibes. These episodes were specials. He got it. He got that they were specials, that they were connective tissue, as some of you were saying in the temporal feedback chat. But the show would be something new because they had this new hero. The episode ends with the old guy retiring and a superfly alien guy running away wearing nothing but his briefs, off to have adventures in time and space, and Charlie was bought in. He was along for the ride. Now fully invested and ready to share his newfound interest with someone else, he invited a couple of his friends over to watch Special 4 with him the next day. He figured that this was the beginning of the story meant for them, so it would be okay if he started his friends there. So it was an unwelcome surprise when his friends started to ask questions, especially since he only had an answer for a few of them. He tried to answer as much as he could and convinced some of them that they should probably go back and watch the first 3 specials, and maybe when the new season came out, they could all watch it together and their questions would be answered. He was hopeful that this show was going somewhere, and he was intrigued by it, and he was hoping his friends would be too, and so he took as many of them as he could along for the ride. Some of them teased him mercilessly that very night, the moment the Goblin song came on. Others thought it was interesting, but never went back to watch the specials or watch more episodes with him. But a few he did twist enough arms to convince to watch the show with him, and he felt personally responsible now. Like he was accountable for how good the show was, because he was apparently becoming a budding fan and trying to convince others to do the same. So that embarrassment, that secondhand embarrassment, was now officially his to own. Hindsight being what it is, I felt bad listening to Lance Corporal Baker telling me the tale that day, because I knew what would happen next. I knew the season to follow was riddled with throwbacks to stories from decades previous and flashbacks to scenes from what was effectively a different show, and hyper niche concepts which are not explained because there's a feeling of understanding baked into the script. I knew that despite Russell T Davies patting himself relentlessly on the back for not using Daleks and Cybermen and Weeping Angels or any other creature not popularized by Russell T Davies, that didn't stop him from making the Villain Guard Corporation a major recurring bad guy, or from bringing back the Midnight Entity. Callbacks to his own era of the show are littered throughout the 2-season run of the Disney episode, and that's before dealing with the many connections to the classic era. I knew without him telling me that connecting with the show in this way was going to be a challenge for Charlie, and it was going to be impossible for his friends that he was dragging along. I remembered the scene from Lux that had fans showing up in the episode, talking about the show from the past, talking about actual episode names of adventures that he hadn't gone on, and the show even comparing the old stuff to the new stuff and making it clear that what a fan is someone who has seen the old stuff, because the old stuff is the true thing and the new thing is, well, it's the new thing. He was alienated in the very DNA of the show. It was made for a different generation. It was still made kid-friendly, but that didn't come off as being for him. The talking babies and all that kind of stuff, that didn't feel like being for him. It felt patronizing. It didn't feel like the show made room for him as a young viewer who didn't have access to the classic episodes or the revival episodes. Even knowing all of that, what Charlie told me next still kind of took me for a loop. He said that he felt like the show had lied to him. He said the existence of 2 doctors was to him a promise that the old show would get to live on forever and the new show would get a fresh start and a life of its own. Yet the old show never let go of the new show, never let it breathe enough to develop its own identity. His words sent me back, and I thought about my own entry point to Doctor Who. It too was heavily indebted to the show which came before, but it was also given a chance to be its own thing. When characters in the early seasons referenced the Doctor's history, it was always the 9th Doctor's history. Or if there were references to something before that, it was references to the Time War and the War Doctor, this Doctor we didn't know about yet. Which means that we could reference this enigmatic guy's background and imply that he's an alien who's been around forever, but if you were to go and Google it, everybody would be asking the same questions. You're not missing anything. You would see that there were years and years and years of material that you haven't caught up on, but as far as the story goes, you are all at the same point. No one knows about this time war. No one knows about this version of the Doctor. No one knows where we are, who he is, where we're going. It's new for everyone. I remember how in that era of RTD, There were nods and references and throwbacks to the classic era, but the plots didn't hinge upon them. When old villains did return, it wasn't this big fanfare of an old villain returning necessarily. It was an incorporation of new ideas, new origins, new looks for the characters, new lore sometimes, and it was fresh for everyone. No one felt left out. If something from the classic series did come up, like the reintroduction of Sarah Jane Smith, or one of these classic bad guys as we were talking about, it was seen through the perspective of the companion's eyes, their fresh view, not exclusively through the Doctor's all-seeing point of view, the all-seeing point of view of a fan who is supposed to know everything that has happened already. By letting us experience the Autons and the Dalek and Sarah Jane through Rose's eyes, we get to learn about those creatures and characters. But we meet Mel through the Doctor's eyes. We meet Sutek through the Doctor's eyes. We meet the Toymaker through the Doctor's eyes. All the characters that we get introduced to were shown flashbacks to let us know there is something old here. Go find it. Do your homework and pay for it, by the way, because it's not here. Go get it and then come back, and then you can be a part of this adventure. That was baked into this version of the show, and Charlie felt it every time it happened. His experience of Doctor Who couldn't be more different from my own. His Doctor Who was seen through the POV, when it was seen through a companion's eyes, through the eyes of Ruby Sunday, a companion whose guiding principle was, just go with it. To Charlie, Ruby's refusal to challenge the Doctor or probe the Doctor or get any real kind of information from the Doctor regarding what was happening was the show's way of telling him, of communicating to Charlie, that he should also not ask those kinds of questions, that he shouldn't engage, that he was being silly. By the time they're showing versions of fans on screen and denigrating them for asking questions and reading things online, the message was very clear to Charlie. You're doing too much. Just shut up and eat your slop. He was being disincentivized from engaging with the questions the show was dangling in front of him. In any other age of Doctor Who fandom, Charlie may have just fallen off and given up. Or maybe if he was really dedicated, he would have found a way to get the other episodes. He would have bought DVDs. He would have scrounged up money and found some way to get those other episodes. But Charlie, as we said before, was an internet native. He's a 21st century kid through and through. So where did he get his answers? He got them on Google, which was fine at first. The way he saw it, there were already spoilers in the stories directly spoiling the ends of previous episodes. So he might as well spoil it all and understand what's happening. Which, again, was fine at first because he began by just typing questions which Google could answer readily. The most basic kind of questions where the AI could generate a simple enough answer. Things like, who is the Master? Or what is a Time Lord? Or how does regeneration work? He could get those kinds of answers, but he would do so without engaging with Doctor Who. He would do so without engaging with Whovians. So he wasn't becoming a part of the show, and he wasn't becoming a part of the fandom. He was just getting answers. Now, the more subjective questions, which required a human touch to answer, those he had to dig a little deeper. That's where things got bad. Because since so much of the Whovian culture online was in defense mode, there were very few critical voices in that community lining up to answer the kinds of questions Charlie had, which painted the show in maybe not the best light. They were all just pushing back against why the show was fine and why everyone's haters and why the show will never get canceled and why it's all FUD. And so Charlie kept seeking the answers elsewhere, and the algorithm fed him content from a stream, a never-ending stream of creators who had nothing but negative things to say about the show, and about the people in the show, about the actors in the show, about the characters, about their genders. He found, suddenly, 13-year-old Charlie found a whole lot of people that he could blame for the show betraying him. Suddenly, he found a whole lot of narratives about why the show didn't care about him, poor little Charlie. It started slow at first. Maybe it could have been turned around, but by the time the Wilderness Era began, odds were really working against Charlie. He didn't have the older episodes to go back to. He couldn't inform his own opinion. The fans weren't engaging with him in a way that satisfied his curiosity, and so he just kept getting fed this extremist crap, and it radicalized him little by little. And then came the release of The War Between the Land and the Sea, which forever divided the fan base into factions that it never recovered from. And it's unfortunate because even as he watched it, Charlie recognized that there were things about Land and the Sea that he would have liked possibly, but he was too far gone by that point. He was on the hate train, as so many people were. And as we all know now, the BBC saw the online chatter, Disney saw the online chatter, and it became toxic for them to deal with. The deal didn't get renewed, and we went into a limbo that never ended. After Trump's third election and second coup, Charlie joined the Space Force, which is how we met in the Battle of Max Prime Plus, the event that escalated the culture war into an all-out armed conflict. Kneeling in the mud that day, holding Charlie's broken body, I could hear in his voice that all his anger, all his frustration, it came from a place of love. I saw in him that day the wounded child he was and not the weapon that he'd be turned into. All he wanted was to go on a journey with the Doctor, the one that was his, the same kind of journey that we all got. One which was free to move forward in time and not be shackled to its own past. One which was more interested in taking him on an adventure rather than reminding him of adventures he wasn't allowed to be a part of, not allowed to ever see. With his last breath, he cursed me. He cursed the Doctor and Doctor Who and BBC and Disney, the fans, the cast, the crew. He damned us all for leaving him out of the greatest adventure in all of time. I swore that day I would do anything I could to make it right. Hopefully I still can. Which again, that's why we're here today. I tried initially to send this message to the year 2020 so that I could get ahead of David Tennant's return in The Power of the Doctor. The problem was pandemic era internet use was so oversaturated that trying to time skip a YouTube video into that maelstrom with any kind of accuracy, it's way beyond my capabilities. Trust me, I've tried, and a version of that video actually did land somewhere, though I'm not really sure where. Anyway, wherever it ended up, it didn't prevent David Tennant's return. I had similar problems trying to get it back to block the return of RTD in hopes that I could try to give young Charlie the Doctor Who that he wanted. BBC just had the wrong idea. They were trying to recreate old Doctor Who, old new Doctor Who, old revival Who. They were trying to make RTD2 a thing, and it just didn't work. They were trying to bring back RTD and Tennant and Tate and Murray Gold, and I couldn't stop them. I tried, but I couldn't stop them. So if I was going to save Charlie, I had to do it some other way. So I've recalibrated my temporal contentinator, and I've found a window of time, one where I could easily aim a video through. See, there's a large crack in the fourth wall which runs through the Disney era, and I've tried sending a solution through. Now, my hope was I could get it in at the start of the era, but it seems that my time meddling has messed something up. Maybe my first video threw the timeline off a little, because the YouTube that I was supposed to start in 2020, I guess I didn't start until 2025, so I'm not active and there's nowhere for me to send the YouTube video, which means the earliest I can get it to myself is somewhere in the middle of season 2. And that's really going to limit the kinds of advice that I can give you to save the show. If my calculations are correct, Charlie should be about 13 right now and still watching the show with some level of interest, even if it's cautiously optimistic at best. I can't change the writing. I just can't. I can't get the video across the timeline soon enough to change the writing in either of these only 2 seasons of the Disney era. So we have to do something else. There may be a simple fix that we can make so that the show can be Charlie's show even without changing the writing. Now, past Jack, it's up to you. You have to spread the word. And the word is availability. Somehow, some way, the show needs to be brought together, of as much of it as humanly possible. When the wilderness starts, those fans who are on the fence or who are eager but unsatisfied, and those fans like Charlie who started watching but feel disconnected, they need a chance to catch up with the show. If the show has to be gone from May of 2025 until Christmas of 2026, we should be using that time to catch people up. So you need to find some way to make the BBC end its deal with HBO. Disney is not going to renew off the strength of the new episodes alone. Trust me, I've seen how it ends. It won't happen. If, however, they had the full catalog of New Who, they might be enticed to stay. Imagine if New Who and Disney Who and some of Classic Who, even just some of Classic Who, like a best of, and especially the mandatory viewing episodes, were available all on the same platform. Imagine Sarah Jane was there and Torchwood was there. You've seen the way Disney sets up their tabs with all the different playlists of different movies of Marvel that you could watch if you're in a 90s mood or if you're in a Captain America mood. You could do the same thing. You could have tabs for Jack. You could have tabs for Sarah Jane. You could have tabs for any number of things that have selected playlists. That way people could explore the show. And by the time War Between the Land and the Sea comes out, they'll have the context to appreciate it maybe. And the fan base won't be totally in an uproar because there will be more people watching. The viewing numbers will change the dialogue. So much of the dialogue was dictated by viewing numbers. So let's get those people caught up and up to speed by getting everything together. Let's give them a chance to rewatch the episodes they've already seen from the new era with that context so they can go, oh man, that's so cool. I get it now. I'm here for that. Give them the chance. Bring it all together. Now, admittedly, I did a little bit of a lie. I said at the beginning that I thought I could still save the show, and honestly, I don't know that bringing it all together would be enough to save the show now. Now that I've missed my window to prevent the show from being written the way it was written, this little change might not be enough. But to be honest with you, I'm not as concerned as much about that, because if I can't change the world, I can't change the world. But if I could do this for Charlie, maybe it would all be worth it. He deserves to have a chance to go on all the adventures that the Doctor got to go on. He deserves to go back on the adventures with his Doctor and not feel like an unwelcomed guest, a useless third wheel. It was wrong to write the new era the way it was written if they weren't going to keep the old and new stuff together. Of course he grew to resent the show. Of course he grew to feel betrayed by it, join the Space Force, hell dive into a battle for the Dominion over a future of streaming, and die fighting for that cause. But maybe we can change the past of streaming and we can prevent all that and save young Charlie. And some of you might think that this is all ridiculous and that I'm way oversimplifying things, and maybe I am. But I want to give a little bit of my history. Some stuff I used to be ashamed to talk about in public because I felt embarrassed. I felt lower class. I felt unwashed. But now that the world has practically ended and it's just a slowly burning out cinder and we're all unwashed, I can admit to you how I grew up. You see, in my household, taking a bath meant boiling water on the stovetop and carrying it from the kitchen to the bathtub and doing that 3 or 4 times and then cutting it with cold water until it was just the right temperature. In my house growing up, winter mornings meant sitting in front of the oven with the door open. Oh yeah, that oven and stove, they did a lot for us. Growing up meant wearing third-time hand-me-down shoes with barely any soles left. Growing up, for me, in the 90s and early 2000s, meant that I still had antennas when everybody else had satellite. And I still had cable when everybody else had on demand. I didn't have my first flip phone until everybody else already had smartphones, and that wasn't well until my late teens. I know what it's like to have poverty restrict you from the fun parts of life. I didn't have streaming, but I did have television, and I remembered what it was like. There were things that I was into that I couldn't stay up on. For instance, I watched SmackDown, WWF SmackDown, and then eventually WWE SmackDown, and I watched that on UPN, which was a basic network. It was a basic network you could catch with your antennas. But Monday Night Raw was on cable, and I didn't have cable. So I only ever got half the story. And I felt it. I always felt it. And I definitely never got the pay-per-views, and I felt that too. I felt like I was left out. I felt like I wasn't one of the fans. I felt like I wasn't supposed to be watching this because I was some kind of poser for not having enough money to do all of the things. I saw the people in the crowds wearing the shirts, holding the signs. I wished I could have the good money to get in the building or even to get a front row seat. But, honestly, I'd be happy just to have the t-shirt. I wore whatever t-shirt the guy before me was wearing. I understand what it's like to be limited by your resources. And so to know that Charlie wanted nothing more than to watch Doctor Who and to understand what was happening and to be held back because he didn't have the streaming service, I felt that. Despite meeting on the opposite sides of the battlefield, I held him that day because I saw him as a brother. I knew who he was. He was just like me. And that's who I'm doing this for. Jack, I'm counting on you. You got to get this video up. You got to get its engagement up. I don't know how your channel's looking. I know how my channel looked in 2025, but I started in 2023. I really don't know how much I've messed up by throwing your timeline off. Hopefully you have enough followers, enough subscribers. Hopefully you're getting enough action on your stuff to where a lot of people will see this video. I know in 2025 for me, I had, 20,000 subscribers, which wasn't much, but it was enough to get some traction. I'm sure by this point in your journey, you're not that far along yet, but I trust that you'll do whatever you have to do to get your numbers up and get this message out there, because there could be nothing more important. Even if we can't save the show, if we can save one more kid from being radicalized and ending up another grunt in the meat grinder of the culture war, then it'll be a victory. So I'm trusting this to you. Take it from here. You've got the outro. I believe in you. Let's do it for Charlie. Let's do it for Charlie Baker. So despite being different in just about every way you could imagine on the surface, hopefully now you all can see, after we've gone through it in detail, just how similar Doctor Who is to JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And it's that similarity which helped me get over my hangups and give other animes a chance. Even though some would think of JoJo's as real low tier anime fare, it broke the mold for me, and it made me able to appreciate other animes, and it was Doctor Who that helped me appreciate JoJo's, because, as we've said before, they are the exact same show. But with that, I'd like to... Whoa, what's going on? Whoa, what's going on? What's happening here? Sorry, guys, I'm having some sort of technical difficulty. Give me a second. All right, I don't know what's happened. I've had some sort of technical difficulty on my end. It's not one I'm familiar with. Obviously, I haven't been doing YouTube very long, and I don't know much, but this is well beyond me. I'm going to have somebody look at this. Something happened to the video file as I was recording, so this one may be corrupted. If we're late posting this week, I am so sorry about that. We may have to re-record this JoJo's video for next week. Yeah, I don't know what happened, guys. We'll have to come back to this. if I do manage to post this, if it does work, if I manage to clean up the tape and get it up, thanks for dealing with me and my technical difficulties. Sorry, this is kind of a rushed outro. Don't really know what to say since I don't know what will be going up, if anything. Stick around one way or another. You will get the JoJo's video. If I have to re-record it, I will once I figure out what happened here. But until then, I hope you all enjoyed whatever this was, and I will see you next week. No calls to action here. Nothing important to talk about at the end of the video. This was just a fun one. This was just a fun little talking about JoJo's. So there's no need to do any kind of call to action or anything like that, unless of course you want to
subscribe.
What?
Click below to subscribe.
Don't forget to click below to subscribe.
Well, how could I possibly forget that? For goodness sake. You got the message, haven't you?